Hello, this is Matt with the Governor's Office Commission on People with Disabilities. Thank you so much for joining us for our Accessibility Disability Policy webinar. This has been going on. We're having a presentation. This topic is regarding hurricane preparedness for deaf and hard of hearing, deaf-blind, and hard of hearing individuals. And now we'll introduce the other speaker. Sherry. It seems like the interpreter got disconnected. I'll go ahead. So my name is Trevor Anderson, and this is my sign name. And I have a blue shirt, and I have brown hair, glasses, and a beard, and my background is grayed out, and I'm a white male. So my name is Trevor. I work here at Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services under the Texas Health and Human Services. And I'm here, I'm from Austin, Texas, from office, and my role is a communication access observer and specialist. I'm also responsible as a team lead for our practice education group, and we're here to provide training, education, and for various deaf and hard of hearing consumers, as well as interpreter services, state agency employment trainings, and various topics. And I have my background in deaf education, advocacy, international relations, and I'm very excited to work with Matt today for the presentation about hurricane preparedness. I'm very excited. Okay, so Sherry, you're with Trevor. Well, thank you for joining us, Trevor. I'm happy to have you here. So I'm going to introduce myself and give a little bit more information. I'm a white male. I am deaf, and I have a dark blue shirt with a background of white. And my role is Accessibility Disability Rights Coordinator for the Governor's Commission on People with Disabilities, called GCHD. And I work with this office to make sure that the public services and resources are accessible for people with disabilities, and we follow state and regular guidelines. And my experience is working in business management. I'm working in employment services and advocacy. So for this commission, it's a program. We provide services. We focus on making sure that we encourage people who are deaf and blind to get full access, to have equality in their everyday lives, and we have different areas that we serve within the commission. We have 12 members of that commission, and their focus is on those particular areas to make suggestions to the legislature, the state legislature, as well as the federal government, and how they can improve accessibility for people with disabilities. We also support those particular local areas, commissions, encourage them to increase awareness for people with disabilities through a webinar such as this. Trevor?
So about DHHS, let me expand on what that may be, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. Previously, we were under the housing of the Texas Human and Health Services. However, DHS, the education, the deaf and hard of hearing communities here in Texas are who we serve. There are three separate goals of places we want to, programs that we follow. The first one would be connecting with individuals, bridging the gap between them and the hearing communities, and making them aware of things. Communication access definitely improves. The goal for the three entities would be some programs that we have, some examples that we have, or state practices that we are involved in, which are under the DHS there. We have the Board of Evaluation of Interpreters, where high-level qualified certified interpreters we have, and then we also have the STAP, STAP, which is the Special Communication Assisted Program devices that give people equipment that they need to connect with people who have hearing loss. The fourth one we have is DHHS, which is access technology specialists who actually provide support in connecting people in different areas all over the Texas area. We do have our internet, we have capabilities of connecting with people who act to provide support if necessary for different programs, services, answering questions they may have. And so be sure and contact us if there's anything they need.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what the webinar, which the purpose is why we are trying to increase awareness about hurricane safety, what happens during a hurricane during June 1st and November 30th timeframe. And often people with disabilities are impacted by hurricanes compared with the general population. That's the reason we have these protections for people with disabilities within the system who don't have accessibility. So we just provide general awareness. So to make sure people are aware they can have more accessibility for deaf, blind, hard of hearing, and it could be barriers for communication. So understand that if you are a stakeholder and you're not deaf or blind or hard of hearing, you will still benefit from this information, because it's not only people who are deaf people who need this or blind people who need this. Really, it's everyone who needs to be involved with hurricane preparedness, depending on their individual needs or location may be different, their situation may be different. You make sure that they have something in the tools in the tool belt to be able to accommodate them with anyone with special needs, and not just people who are with disabilities, but the general public at large.
Now, remember, there are various needs. Like there are people, like it's important to be aware that we can't cover everything from A to Z as far as hurricane preparedness. Now, it's pretty common practice to, keep in mind all the different things that we can do. We can discuss different options, any kind of webinars if we need to, a one-time thing. Hopefully we can continue to be aware and have all the services that we can provide to individuals if necessary. And thank you. And then being able to set up the stage for this webinar, I envision like, a hurricane, like, what that may look like and all. So just to let you know, in the United States, I noticed that there's an increase in, an average of all the different impacts that the hurricanes and tropical storms and all have had, and that's increasing. And being able to see that, and it's increasing, and they last for days and long. It's a long time. It's not like it used to be. The impact that it had before. Right now, it seems to be increasing. But as far as the risks, there are two risks that we notice. The tropical storms is one, and then water storm surge. Those both are unexpectedly will happen, and the impact that it has on the buildings and the livelihood, and typically the flooding of the water, the surge and all that stuff, the tropical, the hurricanes, the storms, everything, all of that impacts the lakes and all in the surrounding areas. And explaining that and the inland, and the people are like, oh, it's a hurricane, it's nothing. But I'm telling you, in Austin, hurricanes, you're going to say, oh, it doesn't impact me, but yes, it does. However, in the inlands, we'll explain in the next slide a little more details on that. Matt? This is actually a map. Actually, let me just show you here. It's a Category 2 hurricane that was actually hit in the Gulf area. Once it was hit, the storm was, continued, and then the water surged, of course, on the inland, and it impacted the whole state. And so it just shows you right there on a map how that a Category 5 would be even much worse than that, and affect the inlands even more. So keep that in mind. When you have a hurricane, it can impact you no matter where you live in Texas. You could be in the inland, you could be near the Gulf. What's important to know is that you need to be prepared for a hurricane.
Okay, so it's important to be aware of a hurricane's anatomy, what it looks like, whether with the hurricane is the middle, which is considered the eye, and all those surrounding things can be a dangerous area. It could cause wind, water, surges, and with the dirty side, which typically is the right side, that means it's a lot more stronger winds, more high water surge. And so if you decide that you want to maybe, you see a map, that's why you're aware of the dirty side, because it's important to be able to stay inside or be able to evacuate ahead of time, because that could be the more dangerous area. And the clean side is still dangerous, but maybe it's a little more minimal as compared to the dirty side. But the goal is to maintain safety. And we do have a picture that shows the different various months. We talk about June versus to November. And we noticed that the map shows the color variation. With whether you say blue, it's typical, and other colors represent a higher level. The orange means it's more of a higher alert, a high possibility during the time. But if you look at Texas, we have some that happen during the June and July, but really it increases by the time we hit August and September, and then usually it changes the path and towards the east. And in November, maybe heads towards the East Coast, but really it doesn't always follow the map because a hurricane has a mind of its own with regards to winds and waters and paths. So it's important to pay attention between the months of June and November to make sure you have your safety measures in place.
Yeah, Hurricane Harvey was something, that we'll never forget, right? Remember August to September is when that all happened. And that impact, you saw the severity of how that affected the storm surge and all that stuff. But hey, what's important, you're going to say, okay, it's June. Oh, I'm going to ignore what's going to happen. But, it's not important to me, but it can happen. So every year you've got different things, different variables. Strange things may happen, may not. Just keep an eye out and an alert within that 6-month gap, if you will, for future reference.
Yeah, he's right, because this year we have Elena, and it's really a high or El Nino, and so we have a high temperature, so it's possible to stay just compared to the last couple of years. So it's we have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and you're like, whoa, a hurricane, wow, it's increasing, the risks are increasing. And this is what everybody's seeing. So you want to be prepared for that, being prepared, kind of improving your chances of lessening the impact of hurricanes. So, there's variable, different things you can do to prepare. First thing you can do is to stay home, be informed, know what's going on. Second thing is make a plan. Now, you want to know right now what's going on, because you never know. And then building a disaster kit. You want to make sure that you're prepared for disaster and having that kit and all the things necessary for that. Know your rights. You want to know that as a deaf and hard of hearing specialist, DeafBlind individual, whatever it may be. It's important for you to have those stakeholders that are necessary in order, deaf and hard of hearing, deaf-blind and all that. So they're prepared to get involved with whatever it may be. So please, get involved, make sure that you and your community are prepared for these hurricanes in the future, if that may happen. Next is stay informed. And you're like, okay, why is it important to stay informed? Well, it gives you more time to prepare, really. Hurricanes are not like a overnight thing. You kind of know ahead of time, at least a week ahead of time, if you will, that something's starting to brew and happen. That way you're prepared. And then kind of, it's going north, where it's going east or whatever. You can kind of look out and know where it's headed. So that way you're planning ahead. Other than that, waiting, 2 days before the hurricane to evacuate. Well, you didn't realize, oh no, I've got to, you kind of know ahead of time that it's coming. So it's really best to be prepared and to stay informed. And then it's interesting, to be, it can be a challenge for those deaf and hard of hearing and deaf-blind individuals that have accessibility. And it's like, where do they get all their information from? And, knowing where, that can be a challenge. Being fully aware and informed definitely will keep you safer and less the risk of anything in disaster happening. And what one to do is when the hurricane's done, then they got accessibility, they've got, whatever they may need, they've got resources, they've got emergency management, they've got disaster, all these different areas of places to get resources to help those individuals, say before it happens and all that. So, if there's going to be a flood, they're going to know what to do. Okay, if I go to FEMA, for assistance there, what that, they're ready and prepared for whatever disaster may happen. Now, Matt's going to explain exactly where you get the information from. Matt?
Thank you, Trevor. So we just want to make sure that your news sources are established, and where you get your news from. There's 4 that we're going to mention that are common. Obviously, television. You watch the television, what's going on. That's or you go online to have your preferential news. You watch some announcements and information that's being displayed, social media, Facebook, Instagram, and other types of social media. Often there's a blast or alerts to make people aware, and then text alerts. Sometimes you have to sign up for those special alerts to make sure that you're informed of what's coming, to make sure you're prepared to be able to get that through your phone. And so those four that we've mentioned are accessibility. Maybe that's why we want to get those set up ahead of time to have your preferences accessible, so that you're ready and that you're set up. Even though the law requires oftentimes for emergency situations that happen, people are kind of, maybe they're not available or things are happening so fast. So it's important to have those aware and those trusted news sources set up ahead of time. That way that you'll know that you'll have accessibility when the time comes.
And hey, and for example, like here, I live in Austin, as I said, and I know the four different things as far as the news stations. I know the ones that I have, which ones have better captioning, which ones have better coverage and accessibility. So those are the ones I'm going to pick. You know, though I know exactly what station, what channel I'm going to watch on the news to give me all the stuff I need to know. Internet also has captioning as well. And, you know, some of them have better captioning than others. So kind of knowing that, doing your homework, if you will, beforehand always helps. And it's always best practices to make sure all the news that you have, all the information, it's a good, make sure you have good quality of captioning, all that stuff. That's always under the best practices. And that's the goal for us as we work with our entities that be.
We do have some things to touch on where you get access to your information. There's FEMA, there's a resource, there's a website, there's many resources that you can access. There's a checklist of how to fix things, how to protect yourself. FEMA is a good resource. The Texas Ready. Some may have captioning, or some have sign language interpreting services with videos to be able to help you get prepared or fix anything that you might need related with any emergency, not just hurricane, but really any emergency. And the last one I like, that there's a lot with I like the National Hurricane Center, which is a federal government agency that actually watches hurricanes and reports to the general public. And oftentimes the news will have awareness about hurricanes, but not always informed right away. So you have to wait till sometimes when the situation is at hand. But the National Hurricane Center always has information 7 days in advance of something that's dangerous that may be heading our way. And there's a map that shows where the hurricane's going to, the path or the increased awareness of the category that is listed, and it shows what its path that it may take, and then where the hurricane may be going, because before the general public may not know. So that's something they could take advantage of. But again, it's not for everyone, but it's important for everyone to check out.
Great. So yeah, and also I do want to thank, you know, there's more, you know, legislation, you know, there's text alerts, female alerts that happen for emergency situations. They set those alerts up for texting, and those are some of the entities that they use. It's called IPAWS, Integrated Public Alert and Warning Systems, and that is an area locally that will impact, you know, when they're getting hurricanes, they can send messages to the local communities there in the area for housing and shelter if necessary. And also with the, you know, alert systems, you know, sometimes they don't have access. Sometimes it's in English only. And then we're able to show up in some places, and AHAS has accessibility, letting people know, alerting the system, and which is wonderful. You know, we have that. Austin has it, Harris County and Houston has it, Fort Worth has it, San Antonio has it. They all have that system, that alert that lets the agencies know, so they're aware. They have a sign language interpreter ready to provide ASL for those deaf and hard of hearing individuals. They got to sign something. It's not an automatic thing. We have to really encourage, like if you live in Austin, if you live in Harris County and surrounding areas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, make sure you get to your accessibility hazard alert system and let them know so they can get access for those who are needing it. So if you don't have it, just make sure. We do partner with the different entities around the area to provide that access. Now those areas, all in the surrounding areas, have access as well. So, and you being at home, say your electricity goes out and, what are you going to, like, is it going to come back on? Well, they have an alarm system that you got to sign up for. It's on your phone. It kind of lets you know. So if the lights do go out, you've got some form of communication to let you know what's going on. That way you're prepared. Should I stay? Should I go? You're ready. So that's a wonderful thing.
And one thing with the power outage, with the alerts, with that, it lists you information how many people are impacted by it. For example, if it's like 15,000 people, that's more serious, and it could be a little bit longer to fix, more than just 3 people. With maybe just a couple houses only, it may take them a little bit longer. And then, and they also prioritize things. The ones that have more people impacted by it, they try to take on those and prioritize them, maybe with a smaller group. So when the time reaches you and you have that staff to be able to support you, and they'll let you know when and when it'll come on, and you can check. So I like that alert system. It helps us become aware of our environment.
Yeah, and it actually gives us a feeling of self-control in situations, like being aware. You're calm. You're not like, not prepared for a disaster. I mean, it's really gives you a lot of, the energy is a big thing. So, being able to go, oh, okay, no matter whatever disaster may happen, you're prepared. So, another thing is it helps us to feel, in any situation, is having a plan, as we were saying earlier. Like if you don't have a plan now, you might want to get something set up ahead of time. That way you're better prepared. Make a plan, so you're prepared for hurricanes. Hurricanes will happen. It's like never going to happen. What's going to happen. It's inevitable, right? So just know this, your plan could vary. Maybe you live in Houston, your plans may be different than mine here in Austin. So maybe you move to, say, Padre Island or Brownsville or whatever. Everybody's got their different plans, but depending on where you live, make sure you're prepared to make a plan. And with your needs, I mean, just like we said, our needs may be different, but knowing what you may need to better prepare for an event like this, if it were to happen, and providing that, accommodations, like some of the examples, like here, me being in Austin, that means, I'm inland. So the hurricanes I know will probably be less because I'm inland. However, a hurricane could happen. So hurricanes can actually, or tornadoes can happen, the energy, I got to be better prepared for anything that happens, just to be safe.
Okay, so now we have some tips to be able to secure your home. And it's not a full in-depth exhaustive list, but it's just some other things. You can look at other websites for that information to be able to accommodate your needs. Remember, each individual home is different. Maybe some people live in a house that's really high up, or they have an apartment, or they have a mobile home. And so you have to know which house and what needs in various situations. And some tips we can be aware of to make sure that your windows are boarded up with wood or so, maybe a cardboard box or some heavy thing to be able to protect your windows from being broken or piercing the windows, and can cause a lot more damage within your home, like rain and wind and whatnot. And also, you want to make sure to check the drainage system. So maybe the sink or the bathtub, and it means as well as outside, maybe on the street, the drainage system is, with the heavy the rain, we want to make sure that there's no blockage or no, that water is able to drain effectively. In that situation, you may want to, if you've experienced a flood, if you haven't done that, go ahead and clear that area. So what happens is, oftentimes with deaf or hard of hearing or deaf-blind individuals, they rely on people on hearing, and they say, well, it looks fine, but maybe in reality it's not. So maybe ask a friend or a neighbor, said, hey, do you mind check that for me so that I can make sure that all the drainage system is clear for safe drainage. And also the same with the fire equipment. Many times you have fire equipment that's auditory, and it has like, there are some visual alarms. If you could find it, that would be perfect and set that up. But if you don't have that, that means you have to, if you have to depend on ability to hear to be able to know that things are working in proper order, like if it's battery or operated, make sure the battery's not dead. Because the law requires that the alarm system that are set up in your home, and there's a way of doing that. And again, you have to maybe ask a friend or a neighbor to just to check in, make sure it's working and functioning properly, or ask the firefighters to come out to maybe do a check. And maybe if you're lucky, they have a visual lights or aids that they could bring along to set that up for you. And also, I encourage everyone to bring things inside, anything that's related with things that could be easily swayed by the wind, because most things that are damaged are, like, for example, if are lawn chairs or tables or a basketball or tools or things that are put into a secure garage, and that way there's less damage to your home by those loose items. And also, you want to make sure that you're aware of where the power is and know what it looks like. It usually is like some type of breaker box. Know where that's located, because oftentimes internally, an apartment or a small location, it tends to be inside. But for a bigger home, they typically are in the backyard or onto the side where you have, like, it has a door that, so you can check those breakers, and you have to know when to power them off, and when if there's water damage that are close to the plugs or the electric system, you want to make sure those are powered off. So if you were to decide to leave, make sure those are turned off, because you don't want to get electrocuted. So you want to maintain that safety aspect. And we want to make sure that your refrigerator, your appliances, and make sure the temperatures are, in normal circumstances, temperatures out. But if the power goes out, you want to make sure that they're at the lowest temperature, so it increases your electricity and efficiency to make sure that food lasts longer. Because maybe you're lucky that maybe the power won't be out for just a day, and you can still preserve the food that you have. So it might be a good idea to make sure you lower those temperatures to maintain, long as you never know when the next time you'll be able to get food again, or water as well. And speaking of water, fill up bottled waters and canisters in the sink, as well as bathtubs. And the reason why you want to fill up a sink and a bathtub is because if you need to be able to clean yourself, or maybe you go 7 days without a shower, and or you're hurt or you're bleeding and you have to clean that area, it's good to have the sink and the bathtub filled, so that maybe you could use that for even drinking water if you were to run out of water. So that's used as a substitute in those types of situations. Also, you want to make sure that you have your paperwork, your house, your ownership, all your important documents, an ID, social security card, passport, all those kinds of documents related to your identify. Make sure those are secure and they don't really get tossed away in a flood or any type of damage, because you might need those when everything's all said and done and the dust is settled. You have to prove who you are and what you need, and you'll need those documents to cover yourself and prove your identity. And there's a lot of times those documents are also, they have like a phone number or an email where you start that process. And if you don't have that, then you're going to kind of be at a loss, and it'll take a long time for your recovery plan to happen.
So now, as far as making an evacuation plan, sometimes you might want to stay there, and sometimes you can't. You're not able to stay. You got to evacuate. So what do you want to make sure you have a plan and you're ready. Whether you're going to plan to stay or you're going to plan to leave. If you make that decision, make sure you're prepared on where you're going to go. Don't be like, oh no, I've got all these 5 things I got to do and to get prepared. Make sure you have a plan before you evacuate or you stay. And so making a plan may be like putting gas in the car, make sure you got a full tank of gas. That's an important thing. And the reason why is because during hurricanes, when you've got a storm or whatnot, you think there's gas stations? I mean, oftentimes, the lights are out, the electricity's down and you can't get gas. And you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. Or, I got to make sure I've got, there's, just one thing to think about is to make sure you fill your tank up. And say you're deaf, blind, or hard of hearing and you can't drive, being aware, maybe I need to contact family or friends, and be prepared to contact them ahead of time to have that support and necessary to keep you ready and prepared. And make sure that you're knowing how, turning everything, the water's off, the appliances, electricity, making sure everything in the home is, turned off, if you will. That way, when you're like, oh, my home, I can make sure my home and my apartment's safe, making sure everything's off like it's supposed to be. Contact the local agencies or the handyman or the people around that can explain to you where everything is if you need to know where it is. So you're ready and prepared for this. And when you're ready to, head out and have a plan, make sure you, for the lights to come on, you don't want it to be like have this energy surge of like everything coming on at once. You want it to just be a gradual, turning on. And of course, animals. Think about your animals, your cherished animals.
Yeah.
Often you might want to keep that in the back of your mind. Is what about bringing the animals? How are we going to cart them? Where are we going to keep them? We got to make sure they're safe as well. Having a plan for them as well is so important. And then also, we'll explain more about that later, but having services, maybe a service animal or whatever, those are required. They accept those everywhere for hurricane preparedness. And also some people just have pets, they're not a service animal, some people don't accept that, it very varies, but most importantly is to have a plan. And the next thing we're going to talk about is, having your evacuation plan, learning the evacuation routes and following them. Maybe you have a friend that lives on the east side of town and the hurricane's going to be over there, and I'm on that side of town too. And, okay, we're going to go west, or we're going to go north. I mean, having that plan of where you're going to evacuate and go, identifying those different shelters if you need that as well in the community. And keeping that in the back of your head, just to make sure you're prepared for shelters if needed. So, and then also having that plan, oftentimes, the freeways, you see they've got those little symbols of hurricane, knowing that, they have those up there, like there's an evacuation route, knowing your areas and where you can evacuate, where you can't. Maybe there's lanes that are closed and you can't because it's flooded, and where's the other route, where's an alternate route, knowing kind of where you at. Maybe you've got to practice, like, okay, if I go this way, maybe if I go this way, you just kind of knowing ahead of time where you need to go if that were to happen. But actually having that exact, evacuation plan, packing everything you need, putting it all in a moving van. You don't need to go to that extreme, but it's important for you just to think about the necessities, the things that you'll need to carry with you, the 1 or 2 items that are, valuable to bring with you that you'll need to keep you going and functioning. Maybe you need your protected documents, your hearing aids, your medications, all those things are examples of things that you'll need to carry with you if you do decide to make that evacuation plan. Matt?
Another benefit to know about the evacuation route is that if you're not involved with an emergency, but the emergency is going to happen in another place, it can be impacted. You're driving, for example, in the Houston area, there's the city of Beaumont. They have a hurricane that happens, and then everyone flocks to Houston, so that will impact traffic as well. So you're making sure you're available for those and respect those people so they can get to a safe place as well. So other helpful tips, make a checklist, things that would help you be prepared for your plans, because you have to prepare what you can do that without a checklist, but it will benefit you if you have that checklist and have several places where you can go and have a list of if you can contact people, maybe FEMA or Texas Ready. They may have those lists of places that you can go. So it's good to have that list, or you can see if you can those out and have those ready. That we don't have to write in your own handwriting. You have those ready and printed out. I like to write it because I will remember where we have individual needs. Oftentimes people print things, and those are just general instructions, and maybe those are things that aren't pertinent to you. But I feel like if you just have a checklist, it kind of goes along with what you need, and it kind of coincides with what your specific needs are. And also, you want to be able to communicate with other people. That's one thing that oftentimes deaf and hard of hearing individuals, blind people don't have that. They don't have a network, so maybe they don't have a family that can be able to communicate with, or a support system. And I understand there's a deaf community that still has, they have to search and find where their communities are and what their areas of support are. Maybe they have to go that route, or they have to do this or that. So when that happens, people don't worry about having to text 7, 8, or 9 times if they don't have a plan. So if you have a plan in place, they're going to know, oh, they're going to come to my house. That way, There's other, you can set up other routes. So that kind of reduces your stress or your worry. Because I remember during hurricane, I got almost 100 texts from different people saying, "Oh, you okay? Okay." I was like, I was so already overwhelmed, I couldn't even answer all those, and it made them even more worried about me. So I had to learn those lessons and be able to communicate my plan. So that way it reduces my worries and stress of work having to answer those people individually. Also, maybe have a plan B. Like I said, maybe you have a plan. If you had a plan B, maybe if plan A doesn't work out, can't go to a friend's house. What if that maybe their area is flooded already? So it's better to have all these backup plans, a plan B or C or even D, to make sure you can have a safe place to go no matter what the situation arises. Because everything, it happens at different times. So just flexibility is key. Also, want to make sure you have a recovery plan as well, because oftentimes you prepared for the hurricane, but you don't really have a recovery plan, and it can be a little more complex trying to be able to fix your home or find a new home or get insurance or FEMA support. Those are a lot of things that you have to do after the fact, and FEMA and other places have good videos that show you where you can get those things fixed or just have those resources. So if you have to look and you're aware of those things before, and they may help you as well, and make a kit. And we'll go a little bit more into that, what that should look like and what should belong in that kit.
So kit, you may go, well, what does that look like? Well, looking at this picture, these are all the different things necessary for you to have in a kit. Like some of the examples might be like, say you've got an all emergency kit. So we're going to explain that next, but I want to give you just some information that we may have, depending on your individual needs, whether you're, with your disabilities or whatnot, just to make sure you have all the things that you may need in that kit. Now, there's a link here in the slide that we're going to post for people. I know your video, if you're on a video, you're looking, you can click on those. FEMA does provide a list of things as well for you to think about, that maybe you weren't thinking about, just FYI. Next. Now, you might say, okay, basic items in your kit, like, what does that mean? Give me some examples. Water, of course. Now, you may look at the gallons, like per person, per day. Those may be things to think about. Suppose, I have a family of 3. Okay, there's 3 of us, and you're like, okay, if the hurricane hit, and typically in that area, I know it's about 5 days for recovery. So there's 3 of us times 5. That's 3 gallons per person per day. Comes, 15 gallons of water ready, minimum. Now, some communities might say they need 7 days of recovery, which means it would increase it to 21 gallons of water. You need to have that ready. Those are things to think about, though. You're ready, prepared. So, making sure your families, and the communities, organizations, they're actually able to help with that. The needs that people may have to have that kit for your preparedness for these hurricanes. You want to have at least a 3-day minimum of stuff. When I say, some of the stuff could be ruined, I mean, you want to make sure that, your milk, your cheese, all those things that keep cold, they won't last long, but you might want to have, say, cans, or maybe something in rice, like the dry stuff that you can eat instead, because, the milk and all that stuff, goes bad. But having the other things like cereals, those that can, depending on, what your needs or what your likes are. That as far as canned foods, a lot of us, have can opener. We're used to the electric can openers. Oh, how wonderful it is. But then when a hurricane comes and there's no power, how am I going to open up my cans? Well, you got to have something to open it up, the old fashioned way where you open one of those up, So that's something to think about. Also, especially us deaf and hard of hearing or deaf-blind individuals, we need to have light. Light is an important resource for us. We can't communicate without light, right? We got to make sure we got plenty of light, matches, if the battery goes down, you need to have something to back up, maybe something you can light, a lighter or something to, that you can light stuff to bring the light that you need. Another example may be the moist towelettes and stuff, to wash your hands, to keep them clean, or whatever. Garbage, bags. Those are important things to keep around. They're for dry stuff. You know, if you're evacuating and you're stuck and you can't get anywhere, it's like, how am I going to get through the water? You know, just so you know, going through the water is not always safe when you're walking through. It might be a good idea to get a garbage bag, you know, sit inside that and kind of walk around and kind of protect yourself. So plastic ties, of course, to keep the water from going into the stuff too, as well, you know, and also, you know, our cell phones. How can we live without cell phones, right? So keeping that information, you know, we don't have, you know, anything to hear, a microphone or anything like that. We got to have cell phone service. So, you know, we have a gamut of different places that we can charge and make sure all your stuff, your devices have, you know, stuff to charge. I've got 4 already, you know, ready for everybody in our family. So we're ready, prepared, you know. I can't even imagine, like, if I didn't have my cell phone, it's like, how am I going to communicate? How am I going to know information? How? You know, can I ask a neighbor who, and it's kind of hard to talk to with my neighbor who is hearing, and I'm like, you know, just relying on texting only. If they're deaf and hard of hearing and deaf-blind individuals, it's a challenge, and they really depend on their devices for that communication.
Yeah, true. Absolutely. So maybe you have individual specific needs related with your disability. Some examples might be you know, put things that you might want to put in your kit. If you have like a purple, what is that little purple thing? It's kind of it's a waterproof storage for your hearing aid. So if you were to have to evacuate, you want to make sure you want to have that ready, because if it were to rain or everything, it could damage. If it were falling during many hurricanes, people lose their hearing aids, not because of the flood, but because they actually drop it or because it fell off in the water. So you want to make sure that you have that secured and it doesn't fall off, and you put it you're able to put it in a safe place. And you see on the bottom this black square looking thing. It's so it's a braille reader for people who are deaf and blind. If you need to be able to communicate, and you need to have that with you and packed and ready to go. At the top, next to that little canister thing, is a hearing aid battery charger. I believe you see it on there. It has different color batteries, so you need to know your size and your battery type, because not all batteries fit the same. You have to have a specific battery for any specific hearing aid, and you know, that have that color matches and have those various labels too. So you'll know that you have the correct size that will be able to charge your batteries. So, and also we have a written list of things like a dry board or a boogie board. Things like a boogie board might be best because in some situations, and oftentimes you have to write something down, or maybe the ink's dry or it runs out. You need to have a low vision person. Maybe you need to have something written bigger so you're able to write it so they can see more clearly. And of course, dry food, of course, if you have your dog food, your service animal, you need to make sure, because that's one thing I forgot when I forgot to bring food, and I had to give my food I give my dog some other kind of food. So it's important to keep those things in mind about your dogs and providing that food for them.
So now we're going to talk about some of the needs for electricity. I know that's important, of course, but it's also a good idea to have a generator, you know, to run just in case you know, for backup, you know, that you can, maybe it's the kind that it's electric, maybe it's the gas, you know, type of generator to keep it going when the electricity goes, when the power goes out. So there's various ways of having that backup. It's important to know, depending on your individual needs, what you need. Let me give you some examples of a generator that I have. You know, there's a gas, you know, like I said, generator that you can pour gas into and start it up. They have propane tanks that you can use. You can actually, some have a dual fuel, which means you got to have both. So, I mean, there's various things that people may need to have their generator running. Now, I noticed that some of the new generators are solar powered, which is cool. But then you got to think, okay, during a hurricane, are we going to have enough sun to, you know, kick that solar in and all that? So, you know, maybe, you know, recovery works afterwards, maybe, you know, so just preparing the different options for the generators. Now you might go, oh, generators are dangerous, you know, maybe that's cool, but oh, they can be dangerous. Now, Can it cause a fire? I mean, you could get hurt. I mean, gas causes, it can cause fires. The red, tanks that you have where you're pouring the gas in, the gas tank, when it's sitting there for 2 or 3 years without being touched, and then you use it to pour it in there, you don't want to use that old gas if it's over 12 months old. It's important to find like an additive of some sort that you can put in there to make your gas last longer and more fuel efficient. That way it doesn't cause any issues. Now, adding that additive to that, you don't want to get a big one and like filled up and have to carry all that. You want something small, little small containers, if you will, so it's easily poured in there and everything. Now, propane might be a better option because it lasts longer. It can sit there, and that's probably your best option. Now, make sure that your propane's ready and that it's full before the hurricane actually hits. That's always a nice thing to remember.
You want to make sure you read all the descriptions and all the instructions so you understand them. And some equipment may run by just, maybe you notice it has a visual warning. Maybe that might be better for deaf and hard of hearing individuals. That way allows you to get sort of an alert or an alarm, or to know that something's wrong, that there's a hazard in place. So those are something to look for. So stop wisely to make sure you pick the right ones that fit your needs. And most of the time you'll have an electrical a little square tag that shows the lightning symbol that knows that for shock hazards, and so things that you can do you have an AC sources. Maybe, for example, you have a house and that you want to be able to connect to the generator, but maybe, for example, a refrigerator. And so you want to be able to plug that into but I would not do that. I would not encourage that, because you want to unplug that from the actual house, because you want to make sure you're safe and leave that so you don't want that to more damage to occur. And you want to make sure that you have equipment that's plugged in with the correct type of cord. Oftentimes you see an old outside cord that means you can, that's kind of waterproof, and usually they're orange or the other colors, but you want to make sure that you read the label that it is an outside cord, because that would be better. And you make sure that the generator or it's grounded, make sure that it is grounded and it has a good connection. But so the reason it's important to have it grounded, because the electricity goes from the top to the bottom for gravity. So if it's at the top and it doesn't have a place to go, you want to make sure that's a shorter distance. So if you were to touch it, make sure that it's important that it's grounded, because you want to avoid a dangerous situation. So so you can see where the instructions on to make sure everything is grounded and set up properly, and follow the manual instructions, read it carefully.
So I think we've got about 10 minutes left, and I've already seen some questions that people have asked. And we're going to touch on some of these things just briefly about fire hazards. And so we'll discuss the safety features and all that stuff with gas and any type of propane. Like we talked about how those could cause fire and all that stuff. And you might have a lighter or a candle or something lit. You don't want to have any cords near that or anything like that, or any of those tanks next to that, because that could cause a fire. Now, maybe your neighbor could help. Maybe you could, talk to your neighbor, just be familiar of your environments, where you're putting everything and such. Now there's various differences when it comes to, like I said, making sure you have regular, gas in there. You don't want to put it in plastic, make sure you keep everything safe, as necessary. When you're
make sure it has that tag on it, or anywhere. You can't bring it anywhere, so you have to make sure it's away from the structures. So there's some safety issues. Maybe you want to make sure that it's running outside in a dry area location, at least 15 feet. 15 feet away from any structures. So that way you have less risk of a house or electricity issue, or things catching fire. If there's wind, make sure it's not inside, because you could have possible carbon monoxide poisoning, which means because you can't really smell it and you're not aware of it, and then it can kill you. So it's very important to have good ventilation so that you're not affected by that, and we make sure it's in a safe area, that it's that no one can steal it. Oftentimes people see that, oh, it's a, they sell it, and so you want to make sure that it's in a safe place where people cannot swipe it. And you do not plug it in in the house. Do not do that, because it's not meant for full house services. It's just meant for like something like a refrigerator or a cell phone or things like that, but not to run the entire household. I'm sorry. You want to make sure that storage is important, to be able to watch where it's stored. You don't leave it out running all day out in the sun. You have to put it in a particular safe storage, and you have to watch it, maintain it, make sure there's not other flammable materials close by. You make sure it's stored in a secure stop location. You don't want to fill it because if you run out of gas and you can't just leave things in it. It could be damaged. And some apartments or HOAs won't allow you to use, or they have required use of a specific kind. So I wouldn't store it in your home because it's flammable and it's against the law. But there are some rules with the particular local areas where you live. Check those out and make sure that with people with disability, make sure you bring that. And because you have fuel, you can add oil, and if not, maybe it could be dangerous. So it's a good idea to maybe to have a flashing light as a warning symbol, because you're not able to hear those alerts or warnings.
I've seen some questions here on how to lessen the generator sounds and stuff. Maybe your neighbor can hear the generators. How do you lessen that loudness of them? I mean, it's not something that may be on the top of our list, if you will, when it comes to disaster, because we're really focused on ourselves and our safety and all that kind of stuff. We don't, you don't want to have it inside. It must be outside. That way, the noise is going to be a loud thing, but, looking at the various different generators, some are quiet. Some maybe not so much, but you can, research that and find out what works for you. It's important though, that when a storm happens, that you think of self first. What about me? Are my needs being met? And then I can expand to, your surroundings and your loved ones and such. But, you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of everybody else. But at the same time, your rights as well. However, I know there's various different, lawyers who can protect you, laws that can protect you. I'm sorry, that, give you the rights, make it clear, the verbiage, if you will, on the acts that they have to providing communication access for those individuals with disabilities, providing accommodations. Now, with disasters, that could be, maybe you think, oh, my rights are gone. Well, no, your rights are not gone. You are covered, with accommodations and help if necessary.
Yeah, we need to make sure you have the reasonable accommodation. Maybe ASL interpreter, like if it's a flood or the hurricane, interpreter can't get there because they're also blocked. So that's not reasonable. If you have to find other ways, maybe there's a relay service to the phone, or emergency situation, you can use relay services. Means it's the same. You're in the same room, or if you can't get another type of support, and you have to be able to maintain until someone else can come. And that's only in those various situations. You can have written communication, or you want to be able to get a quiet location because you need to be able to hear, because a lot of loud noises in the background and you don't understand. So ask to maybe be moved to more of a private, quiet, so you can collect information for the things that you may need, for shelter or FEMA services. And you can ask for a plug or a charge, so to be able to charge your phone, because that's important. Maybe yours could be a little more important because you actually use that for communication and a secure place to be able to sleep. Because a lot of people in those shelters, they're so large and they have maybe have a different room for people with disabilities that they're aware of, so they can provide a safe place for you to sleep, because maybe you're deaf and hard of hearing and or deafblind, and maybe you can't hear, and they may try to take your things, and so it's important that you have a safe place so you'll be able to watch your things. And you can ask for those reasonable accommodations, and ask to be able to use effective lip reading, understand, have a face-to-face conversation, things like that. Say, hey, I need to be able to read your lips, or you could ask to slow down. So those are reasonable accommodations. And also, you want to be able to announce. You want to make sure those announcements that are going on, and you're maybe unaware. Maybe it's a loud surrounding, and you miss all those important information. So where do you go next to be able to the bus, or you say, I need to be able to get that information provided to me. And also, they have you have service animals. They have to be able to permit those in those particular shelters, that in those living areas. And you want to ask if you need to have stuff repeated to you. Ask for repeated information. Don't say say it again. Hey, say, could you tell me that in a different way? Because sometimes one way is not clear. If someone were to repeat it in a different manner, and then it might be more word understood based on their word choice or their explanation, you might be able to understand that better. And as maybe understanding the feeling of overwhelmed, because hurricanes aren't easy to go through, and you can't just assume everything's accommodation, everything's their needs met. So there's an ADA coordinator. You ask who's responsible for this, for the accommodations, because I need help. Many people you meet are volunteers, and they're not aware of, I need an interpreter. I need an interpreter. They're not sure. Say, who's responsible for accommodations, and maybe they can locate that need for you to provide that accommodation.
And another thing that people can get is support, having the accommodations of that, our rescue, people, the DHS has contracts with various different local specialists that can actually provide access for support and technology and all. And maybe you're finished with your webinar. It's like, okay, what am I going to do next? Like, who am I going to contact? I need an access specialist. So you need to make sure you find your access specialist. So like, is it free? Is it not free? Kind of someone helping you navigate through that. And also during hurricanes, we the access specialists, the technology specialists, they're actually there on the scene, ready to do whatever they need to do during a hurricane. Even if we'll be there if y'all can't be there. We're there to support you, whatever your needs may be. If you've lost your hearing, and we can provide, temporary hearing aids if you had one and you don't have one anymore. I mean, we have so many different specialists all over Texas. That we're here to support during disasters, and preparing for that in your local with your specialists would be great. There's links that we've shared before that you can click onto and find out who they may be, or you can contact us at dhhs.com and email us at hhs.com as well. You can contact us as well, but I will. We're running out of time here, but you can contact us anytime about anything you may have, any questions. Okay.
And one thing you want to do is get involved and make sure that the deaf and hard of hearing and DeafBlind, their perspectives and their local agencies and committees that are involved with various disabilities emergency management plan, or if they don't have that in your local area, then be able to contact a friend or a family member or a neighbor and be able to set up your own committee or task force to be able to support each other and when you have a plan. Well, we are out of time, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and continue to stay for a few minutes, answer any questions you may have after we stop the recording. And we want to thank you so much for your time and attention.